This silo is all that remains of Pine Haven, the Flatwoods farm where Beulah Buchanan began her final journey the day after Thanksgiving 1917. From Pine Haven, they carried her body to the little cemetery at Central Grove for burial. These photos were taken Saturday morning, January 20th, 2024, when I walked that same route. After Beulah's mother, Laura Buchanan, died in childbirth in 1911, Berry School professor O.L. Titrude and his wife Harriet took in Beulah and her newborn brother John. They changed John's name to Clyde and formally adopted him, but for reasons unclear didn't legally adopt Beulah or her older brother Paul. Taking in Beulah, the Titrudes saved her from a life no little girl should lead, but they couldn't save her from every peril. Professor Titrude came to Georgia from Minnesota in 1907 to teach agriculture at the recently founded Berry School. He bred cattle, developed varieties of corn and barred rock chickens, and was active in church and civic activities. His employer, Martha Berry, had a heart for the uneducated children of the poor farmers and textile mill workers of Appalachia. She took in needy or disadvantaged children whose parents couldn't provide for them and believed this was their best chance at an education. From what is known of the Buchanan family, the children would have been disadvantaged. At the time of the 1910 census, John and Laura were weavers at the Massachusetts mill in Lindale, near Rome. Textile mills were noisy, dirty places packed with clanging machinery and choked with lint. To maintain the high humidity needed to preserve thread, mill windows were closed even in the sweltering summer months. The foul, stifling environment promoted tuberculosis, bronchitis, and other respiratory diseases. Textile mills needed inexpensive labor for menial tasks, so they employed children. One of every 4 workers in the South's cotton mills was between 10 and 15 years old. There were documented cases of workers as young as 8 at the Massachusetts mill. Beulah Buchanan turned 8 in April 1913 when photographer Lewis W. Hine visited the mill and took beautiful but haunting photographs of youngsters employed there. Whole families worked in textile mills, and the Buchanans probably followed suit. In 1900, John and Laura worked at the mill in Tryon. 10 years later, they were at the mill in Lindale. Following Laura's death in 1911, John moved down the Coosa River to another mill in Gadsden, Alabama. This was his way of life, and it's likely that his son Paul worked at the mill in Lindale, and it's possible that Beulah did too. If the children were destined to follow in their mother's footsteps, Laura's sudden death changed everything. Within a year, 13-year-old Paul left his father's home to strike out on his own. He did auto repair work in Macon and served in the Army during the Mexican troubles in 1917. By 1919, he was an inmate in the federal penitentiary in Atlanta for counterfeiting, his second of 3 known periods of incarceration. But Beulah blossomed. She accompanied baby brother Clyde into Professor Titrude's household, attending school and church at Central Grove, a farming community about 8 miles north of Rome and about a mile north of Pine Haven. She was active in school and community events, living far from the dirt, din, and drudgery of the textile mill. Life at Pine Haven was vastly different from what it would have been in Lindale and at the Massachusetts mill. What cut short Beulah's life? I puzzled over this from 1990 to 2006, searching for answers. I learned enough to write Searching for Beulah Buchanan for the autumn 2006 issue of Georgia Backroads magazine, and recently posted a YouTube video by that same title. So I knew what became of her family, but I didn't know what had happened to her. Renewing the quest in 2009, I found the telephone number of Beulah's niece, the daughter of her half-brother Parks. That afternoon, I anxiously dialed the number in Boaz, Alabama from my office in Rome, Georgia. She answered, and I quickly explained the reason for my call. With butterflies in my stomach, I asked, "Do you know what happened to your Aunt Beulah?" To my dismay, she didn't, and she said all of those who might have known had either passed away or were so feeble as to be incapable of answering. She shared a few small memories of her grandfather, John Buchanan, but that was it. There was only one thing left to do. 3 years earlier, I had researched microfilm copies of the Rome Tribune-Herald newspaper looking for Beulah's obituary. I decided to try again, so I spent 3 hours at Rome's Sarah Hightower Library scrolling through film of newspapers from November 1st to December 4th, 1917. It was mind-numbing work, and there was nothing about Beulah. Tired and with a headache coming on, I decided to go no further than December 6. On page 2 of the December 5, 1917 issue, there was a little article with the simple headline, Central Grove. I leaned toward the screen when I saw Beulah's name. My heart began pounding as I read, "The people of our community were shocked by the sudden death of Beulah Buchanan Thanksgiving Day. She was sick only 1 hour, during which time she passed from one convulsion into another. She was buried in the Central Grove churchyard Friday afternoon." Dr. David Kearns, a retired Rome pathologist, kindly offered his help. He cautioned that a definitive diagnosis was impossible given small information, but said that the sudden onset of seizures, followed by abrupt death, were reasonably consistent with 3 disorders: status epilepticus, infectious encephalitis, and bacterial meningitis. Epilepsy, Dr. Kearns inferred, might be the least likely, since the report didn't say that Beulah's ailment was recurring. The other 2 were infectious diseases that progress quickly, induce convulsions, and may bring about a swift death. He felt Beulah most likely died from one of those maladies. With that information, I wrote Finding Beulah Buchanan for the summer 2009 Georgia Backroads. Shortly after the article came out, a member of the community called and said that he had a 1931 newspaper article about Beulah's brother, Clyde Titrude, which confirmed that she had died of bacterial meningitis. So finally I had the answer. The 1917 Tribune-Herald article said that Beulah was, quote, possessed of a very bright mind, was advanced in her studies, and was anticipating with pleasure the beginning of the school year. The correspondent concluded by saying that she would be missed in church and at school. She would be missed. I mulled that over when I made my way through brush and saplings to her gravesite, pondering how time had nearly erased every memory of her existence. Her life had been short, her grave is untended, and the surviving children and grandchildren of her siblings and half-siblings know so little about her. Even the churchyard where she is buried is nothing today but a desolate plot of pine woods. But my 19-year search to find out what happened to Beulah Buchanan had ended. On a cold winter morning when dawn's dank chill stung my cheeks and bare hands, I pushed aside pine saplings and briars, my shoes crunching last autumn's dead leaves in the forgotten cemetery of this drear ghost town. When I reached her grave, I said aloud, "You have not been forgotten, Beulah Buchanan."